This weak Prime Minister has lost control. He's lost control of immigration, lost control of our borders. And now we're facing massive threats to our economy. And now lost control of his caucus, who are saying that they've been intimidated into voting in favor of his tiny tax trick. He's lost control, but he's holding on to power. Right now, there are as many as 500,000 people here illegally. There are 700,000 students who came here with the implicit promise they'd be able to stay forever, and now they're being told they have to leave.
Did you know that $3.5 billion of your hard-earned money went to businesses that didn't qualify for it? That's right, the Trudeau government handed out cash like candy during the pandemic, and now we're all paying the price. In this video, we're exposing the shocking truth behind Canada's biggest financial scandal. You won't believe how deep this rabbit hole goes and how it's affecting your wallet right now. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Imagine walking into a bank and getting a loan without any paperwork. Sounds crazy, right? Well, that's basically what happened in Canada. The government rolled out the Canada Emergency Business Account Program, or CEBA, during the pandemic. It was supposed to be a lifeline for struggling businesses, offering up to $60,000 in loans with a chance to have $20,000 forgiven if repaid on time. Sounds good on paper, but the execution? Absolute disaster. Auditor General's report dropped like a bombshell.
2 million people lined up at food banks, 38% more chronic homelessness, 1,400 homeless encampments in Ontario after 9 years of this government. She says we're not in a recession. We're in a vibe session, she says.
Mr. Speaker, my message to the leader of the Conservatives is to be a little more economically literate. I guess he didn't.
So what's her message to people who are hungry and homeless after 9 years of her government? They just need to get with the vibe?
Exactly. The upward revisions in GDP that show a good result for Canada in per capita GDP.
A staggering 77,000 companies that didn't even qualify got their hands on this cash. We're talking about businesses that didn't exist, shell companies, you name it. It was a free-for-all with your tax dollars. The government was handing out money like it was going out of style, no questions asked. Picture this, companies popping up overnight, collecting their $60,000 and vanishing into thin air. Shell companies with nothing but a P.O. box suddenly flush with cash. It's like something out of a bad movie, except it's real and we're all paying for it. How did this happen? Who's responsible for this colossal mess? The Trudeau government failed spectacularly to put any real safeguards in place. They were so focused on getting the money out quickly that they forgot about little things like, making sure the recipients actually qualified for the loans. And now for the kicker, the number that'll make your blood boil, $3.5 billion. That's how much of your hard-earned money Trudeau's government handed over to businesses that had no right to it.
After 9 years of Trudeau, everything is broken. Everything is broken. Because he is a weak leader who has lost control. He has lost control of spending, which has doubled. We have the worst housing inflation and the worst household debt of any G7 country. $500 billion net has left our country to invest in the United States. Housing costs have doubled. Food bank use have doubled. He has done this through a costly carbon tax that's driven up food prices 37% faster in Canada.
$3.5 billion that could have gone to healthcare, education, or actually helping eligible businesses stay afloat. But wait, it gets worse. This isn't just about the money that's gone, it's about the long-term consequences. Many of these ineligible businesses have already defaulted on their loans or simply disappeared. Guess who's left holding the bag? That's right, you and me, the taxpayers. While Canadians were struggling to keep their businesses afloat, your tax dollars were busy creating jobs in Brazil. The next chapter of this financial fiasco reveals a $200 million decision that'll leave you wondering, who exactly was the CEBA program designed to help? Here's the kicker. The Trudeau government handed a massive $200 million contract to Accenture, a global consulting firm, to implement the CEBA program. But that's not even the worst part. A huge chunk of this work wasn't done by Canadians. It was outsourced to Brazil. That's right. While Canadian businesses were shutting down and people were losing their jobs, the government was funneling money to create employment overseas. It's like they took your hard-earned tax dollars, put them in an envelope marked Help Wanted, and mailed it to Sao Paulo. The irony is thick enough to cut with a knife.
Creating jobs for American workers with our money. Our GDP per capita is smaller than it was 10 years ago and has dropped more since before COVID than any other G7 country. But he's trying to hold on to power. And so he's come up with a irresponsible and inflationist $6 billion tax trick. The reality is we have a weakened economy, a weakened border, a weakened military, and a severely weakened prime minister.
A program meant to support Canadian businesses during a crisis ended up supporting Brazilian workers instead. It's as if the government looked at our struggling economy and thought, you know what would really help? Outsourcing. Of course, the government has its excuses. They'll tell you it was about efficiency and getting help to businesses quickly. But critics are firing back hard. They're calling it a mockery of fiscal responsibility and questioning why these jobs couldn't have been done by Canadians who desperately needed work. And let's not forget the bigger picture. This isn't just about one bad decision. It's about a pattern of mismanagement that's costing us big time. First, they hand out billions to ineligible businesses. Then, they outsource the management of that program to a foreign country. It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion with our economy tied to the tracks. The consequences, they're piling up faster than the government's excuses. We're talking about inefficiencies, delays, and a complete lack of accountability. How can we trust a government that can't even keep Canadian jobs in Canada during a crisis? But here's the real gut punch. While all this was happening, food prices were skyrocketing and food bank usage was hitting record highs.
37% faster in Canada than in the United States, with inflationary carbon taxes and deficit spending. The Prime Minister now has a tiny 2-month tax trick. You'll even save on Halloween costumes 2 months after Halloween. Does he really expect Canadians to fall for this tiny tax trick just before he quadruples the carbon tax on heat, homes, gas, and groceries? Mr. Speaker, this from a minister who, after finding out that the economy is entering its 6th consecutive quarter of shrinking per capita GDP, that's income per person, down, while the American income per person is up.
It's almost like there's a connection between government incompetence and the struggle of everyday Canadians. Who would have thought? So here's the shocking truth. While Trudeau's government was burning through $3.5 billion on ineligible businesses and shipping jobs to Brazil, Canadians were struggling to put food on the table. Over the last 5 years, more than 1 million people in Ontario alone visited food banks a mind-blowing 7 million times. It's no coincidence that as our tax dollars vanished into thin air, food prices went through the roof. We can't let this slide. It's time to hold those responsible accountable. With elections on the horizon, we have a chance to make our voices heard. Demand answers from your representatives. Ask them how they plan to fix this mess and prevent it from happening again. As we look to the future, we have to ask ourselves, can we trust a government that treats our money like monopoly cash? Or is it time for a complete overhaul of how Canada handles its finances? The choice is yours, but remember, your vote is your voice. Use it wisely.